Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. Today I want to talk about the Turk who destroyed Islam. I'm not talking about myself, that would be very arrogant. I'm talking about Atatürk, a national hero to Turks. A few weeks ago I talked about what a caliphate is and the history of the Islamic Caliphate. And today I want to talk about the one man who destroyed the unity of Muslims and Islam forever. Oh, before I start,
Assalamu alaykum, brothers and sisters. So today I'll be debunking a video that has honestly irritated me. I saw a couple years ago, and what hasn't left my mind is its complete misunderstanding of Turkish history, especially the relationship between the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Republic, and Islam. More importantly, it just baffles me that someone is so capable to claim that they are neutral just to contradict themselves 2 seconds later, and to romanticize certain elements of history simply to smear Islam. This video in question, this channel in question, is Apostate Prophet, one of the biggest ex-Muslim and anti-Islamic platforms on the internet. And while Muslims have already debunked Apostate Prophet's claims over and over again, check out the playlist if you're interested below. No one has addressed any of his videos whenever it relates to Turkish history or politics. So that's going to be the topic of this video, and this is because many Muslims aren't aware that people are capable of weaponizing historical events or narratives to lie about Islam. People have done this with the Crusades, the Ottoman Empire, and most recently the European refugee crisis. However, this specific Apostate Prophet video that I will be responding to is the one titled "The Man Who Destroyed Islam." Look, before I even start the video, I need to address who Apostate Prophet is talking about. The man that appears on the thumbnail is none other than Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, and if you haven't seen my channel, I'm going to give you some quick context. He was the first and founding president of Turkey from 1923 to 1938, who was responsible for not only abolishing the Ottoman Empire, but more importantly the Caliphate, the once spiritual and political successor to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Atatürk also secularized Turkish society heavily, making radical changes to how Islam was practiced in the country. With all of this in mind, Apostate Prophet argues that Atatürk abolishing the Caliphate 100 years ago is what destroyed the unity of the Muslim world forever. And to give him some credit, AP is technically right. The Caliphate prior to its abolishment was the universally accepted ruler of the Islamic world, and what Atatürk ended up doing divided it. More importantly, Atatürk also inspired many other Muslim countries to follow Turkey's model, that being a Western secular state. This is a very extensive topic and will be something I will touch on throughout this video. However, my biggest problem without even starting the video is the Prophet implying that Atatürk, quote, destroyed Islam. While I just said that the Muslim world is in a good state right now, it doesn't mean that Islam is dead, and the fact that Islam is going to be the world's largest religion by 2070 is a testament to this. This could have just been clickbait for the video, but regardless of the actions of one man, that being Atatürk, he has not changed the inevitable that Islam is going to be the dominant religion of the world in a matter of decades. And we're not even 1 second to the video, and yet Apostate Prophet has already fumbled.
Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. Today I want to talk about the Turk who destroyed Islam. I'm not talking about myself, that would be very arrogant. I'm talking about Atatürk, a national hero to Turks. A few weeks ago I talked about what a caliphate is and the history of the Islamic Caliphate. And today I want to talk about the one man who destroyed the unity of Muslims and Islam forever.
As I mentioned before, what Apostate Prophet says about the Caliphate is unfortunately true, because ever since the Caliphate, once the only authority that most Muslims rallied upon was abolished in 1924, the Islamic world has suffered from an existential crisis, not knowing what leader, country, or even ideology to follow. It's even something that we see to this day, and Kraut's video, The Turkish Century, explained this really well. While the same video has a lot of dodgy claims about Islam, so there's my warning for that, the overall message in the following clip is interesting to at least consider.
The Caliphate had existed since Islam itself existed. The title had gone from the Umayyads to the Abbasids to the Ottomans and was seen as an integral part of the Islamic faith and the understanding of the Ummah as a community of Muslims in the world under a leader. And with one stroke of a pen and the presidential proclamation, Mustafa Kemal abolished it. Gone was a central element of the Islamic world, an authority to all Muslims and their understanding of themselves as a group identity and part of a community that had existed for over 1,000 years. The consequences of this decision were monumental. It completely shattered a key element in how many people in the Muslim world saw and understood themselves. What are we now? Who are we? What is our tribe? our identity, our community? Are we still Muslims? Can Islam persist without the Caliphate? Are we nationalities? Are we Asians? Are we Africans? Are we Arabs? Are we Iranian? Are we races? Are we comrades? Are we a community? Can Jews or Christians be part of our community? Can we live with Hindus? Are we kings? Are we republicans? What? Where? Who? How? Many, if not most, of the problems throughout the Islamic countries in identity, politics, and nationality can be traced back to this fateful moment.
That being said, however, Apostate Prophet started the video still saying,
Today I want to talk about the Turk who destroyed Islam.
again, this is wrong. Yes, Turkey was and still is a Western secular state, not only secularism enshrined in the Turkish constitution, but Atatürk's reforms to Islam were enforced through force, and those ripple effects are seen till this day. That's undeniable. However, it doesn't mean that Islam completely vanished from Turkish society, and ironically, many secular Turks, the same ones that sided with Atatürk, whether it was politicians or journalists at the time, repeatedly justified their reforms to Islam as something that ironically benefited Islam, even using Abu Hanifa, one of the biggest Islamic scholars in human history, to support their argument. This just goes to show that Islam, regardless of how people used it, was still important in Turkish society. It was a perverted version for sure, I'm not denying that, but Turks still worshipped Allah regardless, and the statistics show this. Not only that, but many of the reforms began with the Ottoman Empire decades ago, and Atatürk simply finished the job. Both the Ottomans in its final years and the Turkish Republic were largely identical from one another. This is something agreed upon by many historians. Honestly, this just shows that Apostate Prophet either didn't do his research or simply distorted history to leave an inaccurate impression on his ex-Muslim audience.
Some of you might know that I'm of Turkish origin, others might not even care. I don't blame you, I don't care either. For Turkish people, it is impossible not to know about Atatürk. Atatürk is the most important historical figure to most Turks. He's respected, loved, truly venerated. Statues of him are everywhere in Turkey. You see him when you go to school. You have dedicated holidays for him. In fact, on November 10th every year, at the time of the day he died, Turkey stands in silence for 1 minute in his honor. Personally, I've never been able to really relate to that, because I grew up in a religious family that didn't really care for the secular Atatürk. And probably also because I grew up in Germany, really adopting a German Western mindset. And in Germany, I learned not to idolize and deify a figure because, obviously, no, not just because of that, but with a German mindset, you just don't do that, right?
What Apostate Prophet mentioned here is interesting to say the least, because Atatürk is definitely one of the most glorified historical figures in human history. Like, I would say this full-heartedly. You don't see many people, for instance, hanging up portraits of Washington, Napoleon, etc., but you do see this with Atatürk, and even non-Muslims admit this.
I lived in Istanbul for a bit back in the mid-1990s, and even then, every house, shop, or restaurant had a photograph of Atatürk prominently displayed, to a degree that I personally have never seen of any other figure in any other country.
This is indeed true. However, Apostate Prophet, and this is my message to you if you even bothered watching this, you do realize that you're doing the exact same thing that you preached against, glorifying Atatürk.
Today I want to talk about the Turk who destroyed Islam. I understand why Turks idolize Atatürk so much though. Atatürk literally saved Turkey. But Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who was a very successful and influential commander in the Ottoman army, started a new movement against this defeat of the Ottoman Empire and the loss of independence. He was the army, awakened the defeat of the Turkish people, established the war, a national movement, and a new parliament. Turkey united the national assembly. After that, Turkey was united the Turkish independence. Turkey's claim to remain the Ottoman Empire was occupied by Greece, France, the UK, and Armenia. The Turkish nationalists decided to win this war. They started the forces.
Anyway, if you are watching this Apostate Prophet, I recommend you to read Gavin de Brockett's Collective Action and the Turkish Revolution, where an actual historian will expose not only yourself, but also many Muslims and many Muslims watching my video, the common trap of deliberately or accidentally glorifying Atatürk. It is something that I will touch on later in this video.
I understand why Turks idolize Atatürk so much though. Atatürk literally saved Turkey. He saved it from being subdued and partitioned. The Ottoman Empire was allied to Germany and was part of the losing side in World War I. The Ottoman Empire, where the ruler was also the Caliph, the spiritual ruler over the Muslim world, accepted defeat in World War I and sat down with the Allies for negotiations. The Allies proposed that Ottoman Turkey should be hit very heavily. It would be financially limited, nearly entirely disarmed, internationally tried for war crimes, territories given to Greece, Armenia, and a possible Kurdistan, Istanbul taken and internationalized, and more. This was a very heavy payback for the aggressive history of the Ottoman Empire, the alliance with the German Empire, and war crimes and genocides that were said to have taken place.
Wait, what?
The Ottoman Empire, where the ruler was also the Caliph.
What Apostate Prophet just said, and I'm going to say this with 100% confidence, is like me saying that King Charles is the leader of the United Kingdom and not Rishi Sunak. That's going to sound baffling to a lot of people, and rightfully so, because by the time World War I started, the Ottoman Empire was a constitutional monarchy. The last Sultan, who actually had absolute authority, was Abdul Hamid II, who got deposed in 1909, 6 years prior to World War I. And instead, the new Sultan, Mehmed V, which was before Mehmed VI, which is the Sultan that Apostate Prophet's talking about. But anyway, Mehmed V was basically a figurehead of the new Ottoman government with little autonomy of his own. But wait, who was his new Ottoman government that I've been talking about? Well, it's the Young Turks, an underground movement that started in the late 1800s, all united against the rule of Sultan Abdul Hamid II, operating in Paris, which, from me saying that, there's already a lot of red flags. They model themselves after nationalist and revolutionary groups in the West, such as Young Italy, Young France, and Young Germany. And that's also why the movement decided to name themselves Jeunes Turcs, the French word for Young Turks. That's also why the movement's largest organization, the Committee of Union and Progress, which was the Ottoman government that specifically ruled during World War I, got its name from the French philosopher Auguste Comte. I'm not joking here. To finally debunk Apostate Prophet's narrative, I'm just going to provide this extract from the Dutch historian Oyel Umut Oenger. There, the Young Turks' efforts produced the Constitutional Revolution of 1908 and launched the Young Turks into the Ottoman parliament and to power positions. Ottomans of all denominations marched into the streets under the banners bearing the slogans Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité in various languages and welcomed the age of freedom and democracy. If you really think that these Islamic leaders were inspired by Islam, I don't know what to tell you.
This was a very heavy payback for the aggressive history of the Ottoman Empire.
What? What aggressive history? If this was after the siege of Vienna or something, that would probably make sense. However, the Ottoman Empire was declining territorially for some 200 years prior to World War I. There's a reason why the Ottomans were known as the Sikh command of Europe. Look at any animated map of the Ottomans on YouTube and you would have known this.
The alliance with the German Empire.
This is again a gross oversimplification because the Ottomans prior to World War I were led by the Young Turks, a movement that I've already made clear were way more Western and secular minded than any other leadership in its history. Therefore, the Ottomans' reasons to join World War I had little to do with Islam, and instead it was a combination of Turkish nationalism, i.e. reclaiming the Turkic lands in the Caucasus and beyond, alongside concerns that the Ottoman Empire would be carved up by the potential victors of World War I. That being said, not everyone wanted to join the war, and in fact, despite what Apostate Prophet might say to smear the Khilafah, it was Sultan Mehmed V that didn't want to join World War I. However, I wonder what happened to him.
On the pro let's not get involved at all side was Sultan Mehmed V. However, his position was largely ceremonial by this point and so everyone ignored him.
So to summarize, joining World War I had nothing to do with the Sultan, and instead most of the decision making was done by the Committee of Union and Progress, and more specifically Enver Pasha, the Ottoman Minister of War at the time, someone who was also described as the hero of the Young Turk Revolution against Abdul Hamid II. So I just want to make that very clear. It was Enver Pasha who decided to use German warships, dressing up their German crew with feathers, and bombing several Russian ports in the Black Sea coast, and it was these actions that dragged the entire Ottoman Empire into the First World War. And the consequences of this decision, specifically by the Ottoman government, was destructive.
Enver Pasha got what he wanted. The Ottomans were now at war. For Pasha, the aim of the war was clear. A new Turkish nation would be born from the struggle and bonded by the suffering. A nation that did not look to the Arab world for guidance, but looked to itself. But while this goal was ultimately successful, Turkey would lose a quarter of her entire population in the struggle. Millions of men, women, and children, many of them starving or freezing to death. And Enver Pasha would never be the man to lead those who lived.
It's honestly shocking, but what's more disgusting is what Apostate Prophet decided to say next.
And war crimes and genocides that were said to have taken place.
The fact that you didn't even bother to name what war crime or genocide that you're talking about is baffling. But he's most likely talking about the Armenian genocide, a horrific event that I don't deny myself. You know why? Because Islam had nothing to do with it. As I have repeated over and over again, the Ottoman Empire in World War I was run by arguably the most nationalist government in the empire's history. The Young Turks, and specifically the CUP, were the same guys that wrote love poems about making the Adhan and Quran into Turkish, something that was later adopted by Atatürk. These were the same guys that gutted the Sheikh ul-Islam's powers, paving the way for Atatürk's secular policies, and more specifically him creating the Diyanets in 1924. And most importantly, they were the same guys that committed a genocide against an ethnic group once protected by Islam and the dhimmi system. What I find baffling is that you, Apostate Prophet, not only knew that the Young Turks existed this entire time, but you even admitted that they caused the Armenian genocide. However, you didn't bother to mention their name in the video, and instead, your audience, and honestly, a lot of other people who are unfortunately naive, will take away that Islam, to varying degrees, was responsible for the Ottomans aggressively joining World War I and killing innocent people. Apostate Prophet, you're disgusting.
The Turkish nationalists decisively won this war, expelled the occupying forces, drove out the Ottoman government, and went on to form a new nation. Turks are today very proud of this, and they credit their bravery and their willpower, and mostly the leadership of Atatürk. In more religious circles, Islam is praised and credited, which is ironic because the Ottoman Empire was on the losing side, and the Ottoman Empire was the leader of Islam. But whatever.
Because I've extensively debunked Apostate Prophet just before, and I'm running out of time, I'm just going to get to the point. If Islam really had no role during the Turkish War of Independence, why was it then that according to Professor Shukru Haniolu, ironically it was the staunch Westernist Mustafa Kemal who addressed the entire Muslim world in these words? Following the fall of the Caliphate in Damascus, Cordoba, Cairo and Baghdad, the last center of the Muslim Caliphate has fallen under the shadow of enemy weapons. Anatolia is a land of refuge for many Muslim communities driven out of their homelands, and hundreds of muftis and scholars have issued fatwas to show the right direction to our nation and the Islamic world. Please hear the voice of Sharia. You might argue, actions speak louder than words. After all, Atatürk was the same man that abolished the Caliphate and also enforced many anti-Islamic policies during the 20s and 30s. That's true. You might also bring up examples of many Turks hating the Sultan at the time. That's also true. I recommend you all to read up Doğan Gülpınar's paper on the topic. It's a really good read and it gives you a lot of insight into how, unfortunately, the psyche of the Turks at the time shifted as a result of World War I and made them despise the Sultan and, more importantly, the Khilafah. But anyway, despite everything Atatürk did after the conflict, I have a question to you, Apostate Prophet. If Islam had no role in the conflict, why was it then that Atatürk's infamous 1919 conference in Sivas, the one that established his Turkish nationalist movement against the Allies, declared that areas not occupied by Britain or France, quote, belonged to the Muslims and would be defended, no concessions would be made to non-Muslims? Why was it then that the Grand National Assembly, Atatürk's new government in Ankara, was deliberately founded on the 23rd of April 1920, which coincided on a Friday? This allowed for the GNA's opening ceremony to be marked with Jummah prayer and imams reciting the entire Quran in celebration. Why was it then that the GNA abolished many of the reforms made by the Ottomans for Sharia law instead, in particular banning the production, sale and use of alcohol, even including punishments through beatings? Why was it then that the GNA was reported to have displayed Quranic verses which resembled more of the traditional residence of the Sheikh ul-Islam than any other Ottoman parliamentary meeting prior to World War I? You don't find that important? Well then why was it then that Atatürk himself, in defense of allegations against the Ottoman government, quoted the infamous Quran verse 49:6, "If a corrupt person comes to you with news, investigate it," in defense against such Ottoman allegations? Why was it then that the All-Indian Caliphate Committee, a continent away from Anatolia and had no stakes with the conflict, decided to raise some £125,000 for the Turkish nationalists, seeing their struggle, in the words of Haniolu again, a jihad to free the Caliph Sultan from the hands of the Christian crusaders? Why was it then that the Palestinians supported Atatürk's forces? Why was it that the Kurds, who were given their own state by the British, by the way, decided to turn that away and sided with the Turks instead? Why was it that historians have pointed out that Atatürk's references to Islam, Allah, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam all peaked during the War of Independence and coincidentally dropped after the conflict ended? Why were some of the most famous photos of the war dedicated to Atatürk making dua with his soldiers and congregation? And why was it that the infamous Balıkesir sermon celebrating the end of the Turkish War of Independence had Atatürk praising Allah and Islam? It is so ironic that Apostate Prophet constantly throughout this video makes it clear that
personally, I've never been able to really relate to that because I grew up in a religious family that didn't really care for the secular Atatürk. And probably also because I grew up in Germany, really adopting a German Western mindset. And in Germany, I learned not to idolize and deify a figure because, obviously, and the absolute veneration of one individual, no matter how good he was, is simply regressive in the long run.
Then why do you espouse the exact same talking points shared by many Kemalists and Turkish nationalists? You provide a masquerade, an impression to your ex-Muslim fanbase that you're just being neutral, but you end up dismissing actual historical facts to romanticize Atatürk and to quote, own Islam. My point is that regardless of how people used Islam, for good or for bad, it doesn't change that it is a really good unifier, something that Atatürk used during the War of Independence. Because you don't have to rely on trivial things like race, culture, or political views, and instead Islam is a way of life that puts everything aside to worship the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it means to die for him. And that is why the Soviets failed to invade Afghanistan during the 80s, because in the words of an anonymous commander at the time, how do you defeat an enemy who looks into the barrel of a gun and sees paradise? I honestly believe that if it wasn't for Islam, the Turkish War of Independence might have gone a different path. And this isn't an isolated opinion either. Many historians such as the likes of Eric Can Zusha, Andrew Mango, and Shukru Haniolu, some of the best historians when it comes to Turkish history, all believe so. And regardless of Atatürk's actions against Islam after the conflict, he still relied on it to not only unite the Turkish people, all of the Muslims in Anatolia and abroad together. That's not to deny the importance of Turkish nationalism either. As I said earlier in the video, there were many Turks who resented both the Ottoman Empire and the Caliphate by the end of World War I. That's undeniable. However, to act like as if Islam had no role during the Turkish War of Independence would be a disservice to actual historical facts. My message to you, Ridwan, Apostate Prophet, APUSS, whatever you want me to call you, is this. Do some actual reading and give us Muslims a break. So from this point on, Apostate Prophet lists many of Atatürk's reforms in Islam during the 1920s and 30s. I was going to just go and extensively break down what, Apostate Prophet missed out. However, because this video has gone on longer than I should, I'm just going to respond to what Apostate Prophet said here.
Now, of course, Atatürk was not perfect. Some of the things that he implemented were done forcefully. They took lives. And the absolute veneration of one individual, no matter how good he was, is simply regressive in the long run.
This is probably the only good part of the video and the only part I could respect. That being said, Ridwan, I would have respected you a bit more if you didn't proceed to celebrate Atatürk destroying the Caliphate for 3 minutes and 14 seconds. This is honestly the biggest problem with your video. You make it clear throughout, over and over again, that you're not romanticizing Atatürk, but then 2 seconds later, you ended up glorifying him, completely contradicting your argument. You constantly reiterated that Atatürk destroyed Islam, when in fact that's not true. You constantly suggested that Atatürk was the one that introduced secularism and Western values to his people, when in fact the Ottomans did so decades prior. You also implied that everything the Ottomans did was based on Islam, when in fact in the final years they were a constitutional monarchy drifting away from Islam and towards nationalism and secularism. You even implied that Atatürk had nothing to do with Islam and he was the one that saved Turkey. Islam had nothing to do with it, it was just this Western secular mindset you like talking about. When in fact Islam was what united the Turkish people during the War of Independence, and till this day still remains a core part of the Turkish identity. In your thumbnail you even put the emoji glasses on Atatürk. Like, that's the literal definition of romanticizing someone. What I'm trying to say, Apostate Prophet, is that you don't care. You don't care about being neutral, nor at least providing a nuanced perspective on Atatürk, because I would have at least enjoyed it. Instead, all you care about is humiliating Islam, and that is it. You've done it by attacking the Quran and Hadith, something that Muslims have already called you out on and have debunked it extensively, and now you're doing it with Turkish history, something that I've now debunked in this video. If you're watching this Apostate Prophet, and I wouldn't be surprised if you are, try me. Try debunking any of these claims that I have up on screen, but I know you won't. And you know why? Because ex-Muslims such as yourself don't care about facts and logic. Instead, all you care about is about smearing a religion that unites 2 billion people and a religion that's growing stronger and stronger by the day. And for the rest of my audience, I appreciate you watching this far. It's definitely been the most strenuous video I've made because it's the longest one. I had to script it over and over, and there's a lot that was cut out. So again, anyone that's watching now, I'm going off script. Thank you so much for supporting my content. I have a lot more on the way. Thank you for watching and take care.